What is up, guys? Welcome back to the next layer where we go deep with athletes and outliers who train, think, and live at the edge. I'm Anthony, your host and co founder of Elos, the performance thermal brand built for cold starts and even harder finishes. Today's guest is a special one. He is a standout in the world of snowmobile racing and a fierce competitor in every sense. With nearly 3 decades of experience on the track, Gunnar Sterne has carved out a reputation as one of the most consistent and strategic athletes in the sport. From winning championships to representing Red Bull, Gunnar's career reflects both longevity and elite performance. This is Gunnar Sterne, athlete, competitor, and one of the most respected names in snowcross. How we doing, man? Where are
Yeah,
you located? Where are you located right now? You got an awesome background. I know we kind of just
yeah,
talked about it,
I'm
but
in my our shop now. It's attached to my house, so it's technically a garage, but it's where we work on all the sleds and stuff. Yeah, it's quite the intro there. I appreciate that.
yeah, of course, man. Where are you living nowadays?
Well, we're based out of Hampshire, Illinois. It's just suburb west of Chicago, a ways.
Gotcha. How long have you been living there?
I've been living at this location here for a couple years. I grew up in West Chicago, Illinois. It's a little bit further east, a little bit closer to the city, but this is where we live now. So it's most of the competitions are a little bit further north, so it's a little bit of a cruise for us.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. How far are you traveling for some of the competitions? Like, what's the furthest you'll travel this upcoming season?
Our furthest race is typically always in Quebec, so that's probably like 16 hours about one way. So we spend a couple weeks out there for a couple of races back to back. So we'll go over there and then we go up to Winnipeg. That's another cruise, 13 hours, and there's not really a close one. They're pretty much all over 4 hours at least.
Yeah, I can imagine that's where I don't know much, but the prime tracks I would assume are up north. That's seemingly what it is up there in Canada, right?
Yeah. The colder it is, the better ability to make ice. So that's
Yeah, exactly. Well, awesome, man. As always, we'll kind of take it all the way back. And for you, man, really cool. Obviously, career that you built in snowmobiling, and we'll definitely get into that. But got to start at the origin of this thing, and obviously, snowmobiling is one of those, as we like to call them at Elos, outlier sports. And so I got to ask, how'd you pick up a sled? I know you were telling me you were young, but go through that story a little bit and how it kind of came to be today.
it's a long story. I've
I
been
can imagine.
snowmobiling for probably before I could remember. My mom always says I was snowmobiling. I was born in April and I was snowmobiling with them that December. Probably my first memories are, before I could really remember. So that's kind of cool that, to say you've been doing something your whole life. Literally, I've been doing it my whole life. So a lot of my first memories are trail riding with, my family and my sisters and riding with them. My parents were really, really, really big trail riders before we were born. They'd go up to Wisconsin and put on like, 300, 400 mile weekends. That's like what they did.
Right.
Kind of following in their footsteps with, just the passion for the sport. And we kind of got into the racing thing when I was about four in that age there. Kind of I don't know how we technically really got into it. I think our parents just kind of my parents just kind of stuck me on a 120, a mini Z at that time, and a kitty cat.
Did either of your parents compete or no?
My dad did race like one time in Eagle River
Okay.
back in probably like the 80s, I think. So
Okay.
they did it once, like on a like B stock class, like where you could just show up with your trail sled and race. But no, they weren't too into the racing thing. They kind of learned it with me, as we raced kitty cats and with the kids group and slowly got into the bigger sleds and bigger tracks and stuff. So it's been quite the long. It's been every single year I've raced snowmobile, so it's pretty cool to see the progression through the years and the progression of our success through the years also.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely gonna be a question. One thing I am curious about before we get into your career, I think it's really interesting that like what kind of like maybe you could speak a little bit to you grew up in Wisconsin, correct?
Illinois, yeah.
You did Illinois. Okay. Gotcha. So what kind of like how many kids were like what was it like being a kid and like doing something that maybe not a lot of other kids were doing that were around you? And then that's one question. And two, where were most of the kids that you were competing against from?
Yeah, no, we were the outlier. There weren't many kids from Illinois. Most of the kids were Wisconsin. That's where the most of the races were. They were all throughout the state. So, it was all local for them and a little bit
Hmm.
more trailing for us. So But it was cool to, to race, to travel throughout the state with the same group of kids and become friends with a lot of different families and kids. And, you race the same kids pretty much every single weekend, but it was cool to compete against them and, share that sport with them. And yeah, what was the first question? I kind of skipped that one.
No, that was my question, man. It
Okay.
was just like, what are the other kids like? What is it like not like be doing something that is an outlier sport,
Yeah.
basically, like when other kids are doing, playing basketball or
Yeah.
football or and stuff like that.
It was definitely I played all the other sports. I did, baseball and played hockey in high school and all this stuff. And, we did the typical, stick and ball sports. Yeah. With racing, it was always kind of unique. I like that aspect of it. Just, especially with, doing something that we love with snowmobiling and growing up doing that. That was cool to be able to share that with my family. And yeah, I got, it was people, when I tell them what I do, they really don't understand it. And then the first thing that maybe jumps into their mind is snowcross, which is similar, but it's not exactly what I do. So I kind of have to explain, what ice oval is. So that's, the uniqueness of that and the different discipline of snowmobile racing is, when they understand, what the sleds are and how fast they go, they kind of, their eyes open up a little bit.
Right, right. And what was that? And what would you say if you could pinpoint, or maybe it's just natural from doing it from such a young age? What was like the inflection point of this thing's not just obviously you were competing from a young age, but it's something that you're going to build a career around and try and get sponsors. And what was there? Is there one thing that you can, or a moment that you can really pinpoint and say, this is when I realized this was going to be my life, essentially?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit later, and I guess in my career, racing through juniors and like through high school, I kind of still just looked at it as a hobby. We kind of did it part time. I was still, I went to college and we kind of did it part time there and did it when we could, when I could get time to do it. And I think that first year after I was done with school, we raced more full time. We tried, there's like a circuit, like a tour that
Hmm.
you get points through. So that was the first year that we tried following the full tour, and we did pretty well. We got third place that year, which was cool. After putting in the effort, and that first year we actually switched brands to a different brand and a different type of sled. I think that that year I kind of thought of it as a little bit differently from where I could think I could like more. I treated it more professionally. I tried put more effort into it. Outside of the track, and trying to, like you said, get more attention for myself, grow our team and our brand, and try to get recognition from sponsors. And a couple years after that, we kind of had more success and got the attention with Red Bull and grew that relationship with them. So that was pretty cool to from to see the success just in those short couple years after we put it full time to the success that later came. The first couple years after that, it grew exponentially.
Yeah, so I got a lot of questions coming off of that. We'll get into the Red Bull stuff. Now you're 28 years in, so you've been using we a lot. So can you explain? So as we get into, so first of all, we talked about misconceptions of the sport and things like that. So dive first a little bit into, yeah, when you say we, who is that? And I'm assuming this takes an army to do this kind of sport that you're doing. So when you say that, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a team effort, like you say. It's mostly it's me and my dad are the main guys. We work on the stuff most of the time here at the shop and at the track. And then there's other people that come help us out at the racetrack, whether it's our family friends, guys that helping us out for years, and my brother-in-laws and my wife, and a couple other friends that we work with. Another guy that used to race quite a long time ago. He's the guy that builds our sleds. He comes to the track and helps us. So yeah, like you said, it takes an effort to put the sled on the track, work on the sled throughout the day, through the heat races. It's, when stuff goes wrong, you need a lot of hands in the trailer working on stuff. And we race two different sleds, so there's multiple classes. And so we're on the track a lot, and, stuff has to get done while I'm racing back in the trailer. So it's, yeah, sometimes it's more hands the better, but it does get like a full trailer because a lot of people do like to come help, especially at the closer races, that they can come to. So yeah, I use that term we. I really don't ever think of it as myself. It's never been that way. I don't. You cannot in this sport. You cannot be racing by yourself. It's not individually. You might be obviously the only one out there racing, but it's you could literally not even compete with just yourself.
Yeah, dude, I can imagine like just like knowing and maybe this is incorrect. Maybe this is one of the misconceptions because I was going to ask you about that next. But I just equate it to like I guess F1's blowing up or any like NASCAR stuff of just like the team that it takes to tune, a vehicle like that midway through and obviously like in between heats and stuff. What is so like getting into that was my next question. What is the biggest misconception about your sport and what's changed if you can so two questions. Let's start with that and then I'll ask the next one. But yeah, what's the biggest misconception if you could pinpoint?
It's kind of a good question. I like to think of it like a lot of your success that happens at the track is not at the track. It's like
Right.
it's here. It's at the shops. It's going through the sleds every single week after the previous race, tearing the sleds down, doing maintenance. Looking for stuff that's broken that might break the next weekend. That's the stuff that lets you finish races and be consistent. Like if you had to put it like in a percentage, at the track, obviously you have to be fast at the track and have like the right equipment and have the notes to go off of from previous years. But a lot of it is you could lose a race easily, just as easily here by not doing the work at the shop as you can like on the track. So that's when people think like you did a great job on the track. No, you did a great job throughout the week here in the shop as well.
Right. Right. So that definitely makes more sense in terms of like the prep. Now, what does the prep look like on race day? Because I'm imagining, and I've seen some videos now of these type of races, and it seems like it's pretty quick, and it seems like you got to be locked in right from the start. So what does the prep look like on race day for you, who's obviously operating the sled? And do you have like a routine that you go through, and how does that kind of work for you?
Yeah, it kind of comes down to a little bit of a routine. I mean, the race days are a little bit different depending on where we go. So the start times can change and fluctuate a little bit, and depending on where we're racing, they all have kind of a different schedule. But it typically starts off with like getting to the track. I don't know, probably an hour before hot laps, and hot laps are probably like somewhere in the early morning, 8 o'clock or so. So you're there 6:37 getting sleds ready. You have to jet sleds, the older ones. You have to put, work on stuff like that with the engine, and then you have to stuff with the handling of the sled, like make sure carb eyes are sharpened, going through studs on the track. So there's a lot of prep before that happens at the beginning of the day, and also like throughout the day, and then before the final. So that's kind of stuff that's continuously happening, and I like to, that's why I like to have a lot of people at the track with me that kind of have a little bit of more roles that we can you know dive into while I can just kind of a little bit more focus on the racing aspect of it, because I'll be on the track if probably 8 to 10 times throughout the day through heat races, and then the final at the end. It's yeah, that's why it's nice to have a little bit bigger team that have a lot of hands helping out. And throughout the day, yeah, like I said, there's typically like 2 to 3 heat races for each class throughout the day, and then a final at the end. So it's just constant adjustments, making adjustments to the sled, and like I said, maintenance stuff going on throughout the sled that helps you qualify for the final at the end, and a little bit of a break before the final for both classes, and then the finals you typically on a regular race day like around 3 o'clock. So yeah, so like you said, the races are pretty short. The finals 15 to 20 laps, so that's it goes by pretty quick. It can last 5 to 6 minutes. So like you said, things got to be right on as far as like the sled prep.
Yeah. Those are also long and grueling days, man. Are you competing like every weekend through the season, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of there's a couple weekends off here and there, but it's pretty constant from middle of December until March, right around there. So it's there's like 10 to 11 races each season, about give or take. So yeah, it's pretty grueling, adding in the travel with where we're going and stuff you got to do here at the shops. Yeah, it's just like a full-time job along with whatever else we got going on with our lives. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
grueling for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's crazy. Thanks for walking through that because I'm sure yeah, for me too, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, this is the first time they're kind of learning about your sport, and so I appreciate you walking through kind of how that prep works and stuff. I know a big thing for you was I see the hat, the sponsorship from Red Bull, and that was probably a culmination of a lot of years of hard work to get that sponsorship. I know it's a big deal in what you do. So can you speak a little bit about that process and how it all went down and
Yeah, it's kind of a unique story. Kind of like a little bit of like right place at the right time kind of thing. Red Bull had they still do. They have like a Great Lakes office is here in Chicago, and my sister worked for a company where she would sample one of her products, and
Okay.
found herself in their office at one point. And this is right when we were starting to get, like, when I was talking about like starting the race a little bit more professionally and followed the tours. She kind of just like slipped who was my athlete marketing manager at that time, said, "Hey, this is my brother, check him out." And he reached out to me kind of early on and just, said who he was and say, "Hey, first thing they did for themselves and to start the relationship was give me some product. That's like the first thing with being a Red Bull athlete is making sure that you like the product, you use the product." And so that was like the first thing, the first point of contact with them. And just kind of, it was probably a year and a half, just, constant communication with them. He gave me some tips about like what they'd like to see out of an athlete as far as like, through your social media and stuff like that, and growing your brand. And just gave me some tips on that, and I kind of took those. And that next year, that's when our success kind of grew. We won the championship that next year, which was first time doing that, and had a lot of success. And I think that was a big turning point with them, with asking me to be a Red Bull athlete, was having that success. And I was kind of putting in more work of paying a little bit more attention to the content part of it, the end of it, and trying to grow that end of it. So yeah, it kind of all culminated into a point where after we won our first championship, they asked me to be a Red Bull athlete, which was a huge honor. That's something anybody that's with anybody that knows about motorsports or extreme sports, that's like a pinnacle of being an athlete, being asked by them, with just the amount, of athletes that they have and who those athletes are. They're all at the top of their game, every single one of them. So it's been crazy. It's been like, I think 6 or 7 years now that I've been an athlete. So it's
Awesome.
been, yeah, it's been a long time. It seems like, with just the amount of years racing with them and doing some cool projects with them on the side here, and trying to do some more stuff like that with them. That's kind of always been like a cool part of them, is they've always said like, what is something, the craziest thing that you can do on a snowmobile, or what's like your biggest dream of accomplishing. They're there to support it. They have all the money in the world to help you to do that and attain that goal. And they want to see their athletes do that. So that's been pretty cool to share this journey with them. And I can't say enough about being part of that family. It's awesome. Every year I still feel very grateful to be with them, and do my best to represent their brand and myself. So it's been awesome. Yeah.
Congrats, man. That's an awesome story. And I think that was kind of one of the questions I had too. Does it feel like there's more I don't know what's the word? Does it feel like there's more weight, I guess, when you compete, because of that hat that you wear, or the branding on the sled? Since I guess you've been doing it for 6 years now, do you feel like there's more weight, or no? Did it feel like business as usual?
Attention for sure. I think
Right.
with the Red Bull logo, you get attention. It's there's nothing beside that. But no, I don't think there's any more pressure or weight that goes along with being an athlete. They for us, I feel like it's always been the same. You have everything that you ever need, but it's a lot. Just a lot of it is just doing the same stuff that got you to that point, right? So um, yeah, I wouldn't say that for at all. They are extremely supportive with how you got to yourself to where you were. So they just want to help you keep growing and doing more. And yeah, there's definitely no pressure with them with results. With they just want to help you grow. And with being with them, with that, with a company like Red Bull, they're not one night stand type of company. They're
Yeah,
with
yeah.
you through the highs and lows for sure. If you have bad year or two, they're not ditching you. They're with you through it all. It's cool to be with a family like that. It does feel like you're part of the family.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. One thing I was curious about too, just like as you progressed through your career now, how does like I guess we kind of already touched on that with that, but what's like the biggest lesson you've learned so far, or like from either that, or like just touch on like what's like the most memorable race that you've had? I'll give you the option to answer either of those, like biggest lesson or most memorable race, kind of different questions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the easy one, yeah, the most memorable race. That's an easy one for me. I mean, there's a lot of races that stick out, but I mean, my first win is for sure my
Yeah.
most memorable. It came at a time when we were doing okay. It kind of came as a surprise, honestly. It was the Friday Night Thunder at Eagle River. So it's like the biggest race of the year. It was a qualifier for the World Championship race. And that up until that point of that year, we were running okay. And during that race, even through the final race on Friday night, we were running like 6th or 7th. And the laps were kind of coming to an end there. And I think there was a late red flag and there was a restart. And like a couple people jumped the restart. So they got pushed back to the end of the pack. So we like found ourselves up to like, I think I restarted 3rd on the second restart, and then the guy that was leading blew a belt right on the start, and then we jumped into the lead right away on the and I think there was like 3 or 4 laps left. So I found myself from like going like from 6 or like a distance 6 or 7 to leading
Yeah.
the Friday Night Thunder final, and this is the first time I really have been leading a race at all. So I just remember like just hang like you have to hang on because there were a couple of fast guys that jumped the start, that first restart that were coming. I could feel them. And, I hung on for it was like 3 or 4 laps, and that was my first win. It was a great feeling. It was pretty cool, And from that point, the next weekend we won both days, Saturday, Sunday. The next weekend we won, the next like both days I think, and then it just kind of steamrolled into success. Like that was just like the momentum that I needed as a racer, and I think we needed, with our team that we were working with our package there, and that was the first year that we won the championship later that year, and won the championship 2 years after, next 2 years after that. So it was that was like a culminating spot where it just like went from like kind of mediocre stuff to like just constant more success and winning. So it was pretty cool to that. And yeah, I think that kind of goes into like the lessons of like confidence is a lot more than you think it is, honestly. With racing, for myself, like if you're not confident, you kind of, I feel myself racing differently if I don't feel good going into a final. It's you'll surprise yourself every now and then. Like I will, if I don't feel great and something might happen, you finish better than you do. But usually, if I feel confident, I race a lot better. This is how it goes with me.
Dude, I can hear the obsession in your voice, and I think that's like the coolest thing about, any professional athlete, but especially those that are, kind of in the extreme sports. It's a grueling process. I can tell, like you, and especially for you, you've been doing it since you've been 2 years old, essentially. But yeah, to hear that story and just get, your first win and really kickstart your career, I think that's like, I definitely can feel that obsession and passion for something, because that's the only reason you keep coming to the shop and tooling this thing every season, right? How many years of professional snowmobiling are you in now?
I think I started when I was like 17. I'm 32 now, so
Bang
somewhere,
bang.
yeah, it's like 14, 15 years professionally, I guess, been racing, and 28 years like just been racing just snowmobiles in general. So yeah, it's an obsession, man. It's all it is. It's definitely not for the money. It's not for the fame. It's for the uniqueness of our sport and what we do. And I love that what it is, everything about it. So even the bad parts of it, like you said, it's the long hours in the shop, and it's the coldness gets to you at the end of the year. It's like we don't cancel races for being too cold. So
Oh, hell no.
it can be bad. There's days you don't want to be there, but that's what makes it interesting in the end, man.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, dude. So that's, yeah, I was gonna ask you, because you're outside for so damn long, dude, and that's kind of what, for us, we're obviously passionate about that problem that a lot of people face. So speak a little bit more about that. I mean, I know, like, if you're in Winnipeg in January for 7 hours, and obviously you're going back and forth from a trailer, but even still, talk about those temperatures and how that impacts things, and what you have to do to prepare for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's like I said before, it's you have to expect any type of weather. We've raced in close to high 40s, or down to, I think our coldest. I remember looking at the temperature. It was like in Eganville 2 or 3 years ago. It was like negative 30 something, 36 or 37. I remember getting in the car that morning, and we took my wife's car there as like our backup vehicle, and the tires, they felt like, right when you started, they felt like squares. They had like flat spotted in the bottom, it was so cold. We had to drive it for a little bit, and they started to round out again. So
That's nuts.
yeah, it's you don't know what to expect. Plus, with the constant like going in the trailer, warming up, getting back out there, and I don't really wear much like underneath. I have my shell on, and I don't like to wear too much under. Just kind of feel like I'm restricted if I wear too much. So it's kind of like I try to wear just enough to kind of get me through the race, and then get back out there. But you never really know how long the race is. There could be multiple red flags, so You might be sitting there with your pit coat on and off. So you're kind of just, there's a constant range of temperatures that you're battling getting into the race, and then you start sweating a little bit. It's just constant, up and down with that. So you have to just kind of expect everything.
Yeah. The adrenaline too obviously makes you feel less cold, right? Like you've put so much time and energy in the week and even in the lead up that day to that moment. And that definitely plays a role for sure, man. But yeah, that's super interesting. Negative, you said -40 or something
It was
like that,
almost negative
-35.
40, yeah, like negative 37, I think it was. Yeah, it was cold. I had to put on my bigger gloves. I have to put on my big gloves. It's pretty damn cold.
That's how you know those people got to gut it out that day, man. I don't know who's performing at a high level in that
Yeah,
temperature.
no,
But that's
yeah,
crazy,
for
man.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
That's
I
crazy.
thank God we have like a pretty nice trailer with heat. Some of these guys out there are just like in their smaller two-place trailer with no heat, just sticking it out, and I'm just like, those guys are warriors, man, for sure. Yeah.
Thank God for Red Bull. But no, man. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing your story. It's really cool. And yeah, we're obviously we'll plug all of Gunnar's socials, and so you can check and keep track of his season. And yeah, man, I really appreciate it. Just a couple more before we round this thing out. It is right now. So we're talking about the cold -30. Right now it's like 105 degrees. So
Yeah.
what do you get up to in the summers, man? What's your lifestyle like outside of snowmobiling?
Yeah, we're working with our family business. We do outside work construction stuff, so we do that. And then when we find time, we go boating. Wife likes to go boating and spend time on the lake, so that's nice. We have a place up in Wisconsin we go to and spend time up there. We have 4 dogs, so chasing them around, that's
Mm.
always busy with them. And we have ducks in our house here, so it's a lot of time outside, just taking care of things around the house. And yeah, it's I go hunting a little bit in the fall before the race season with one of my dogs. And yeah, I mean, we try to spend time as much outside as possible, for sure. My wife and I are seem to be like to be outdoors, as much as we can. So it's yeah, like you said, it's this past week's been pretty grueling, in the high 90s here in Illinois, for sure. It's been pretty bad, but I like it. It kind of balances me out after colder winters. I kind of like this sweat a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I can imagine. I can imagine. For the rest of us, we'll take it a little bit cooler than 105, 95, but yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I think we're kind of coming up on our time here, but I do have one more question that we ask every single guest. I'm very curious about your answer here. So, how would you define your next layer? So that can be basically like, what's your why, and what's your why moving forward is essentially like I can literally be anything, career, personal life, anything. How would you define your next layer?
Yeah, it's a unique question for sure. I think with racing, it's the next layer is just continue to win. That's coming to the track, and when I go down to what's the most simple thing, why am I there, and that's just to win. I feel like myself as a pretty competitive person. That's why I started racing, was for that reason. So, I think when we go to it, it's like trying to win at the track. So the next layer of that would be continue to grow our program with our sleds, trying to make them faster. That's always the first thing, is trying to make them faster. And myself, trying to work on myself as a racer, working on my fitness and that and end of it. I feel like I can always be better with that part of it. It's always I always feel like the sleds kind of take priority with me, and my fitness of being a racer is always second to that. But trying to work on that, so probably my next layer of trying to be better. And then outside of racing, growing our family, and just trying to be as good of a husband as I can, as good of a family member as I can, with our business, and working as hard as I can, putting in the hours. So when I have the time and ability to go racing in the winter. So yeah, that's probably best I can answer that.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Kind of put you on the spot there. It was a deep
Yeah,
question,
for sure.
and we like winning. Winning is an acceptable answer for sure. It is definitely
Yeah,
an acceptable answer.
yeah,
But no, I love it, man. And again, I really appreciate you sharing your story today. It's really awesome everything from obviously your early journey to your success in your career, your sponsorship from Red Bull, and everything in between. Really, really inspiring and awesome. And we really, enjoy giving people like you a platform just to tell that story, because, it's a really cool one, and we think more people should hear it. So again, really appreciate you hopping on today, Gunnar, to peel back some layers, as we like to say. But as I kind of said earlier, we'll we'll definitely make sure to link all of Gunnar's socials in the description, so you guys can check him out. What start of the season's December, right? You said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll make sure that we'll promote some stuff for him. But yeah, for us, as always, check us out, elosthermal.com, all of our socials at elosthermal. And until next time, we do have an awesome guest next week, as usual, pushing boundaries in their own lanes. Until then, stay warm, stay gritty, and keep chasing the next player. Thanks everyone. Really appreciate it.